All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to HBAP Startups. Thank you for joining us this evening. We've got a great presentation, great speaker lined up for you tonight. As we normally do, for those of you new to the Startups group, we have a few announcements at the beginning of each meeting. We do some short networking breakout rooms, and then we come back together for our main event. First off is our mission. I'm actually going to mute. I hear some background noise here. I'm going to mute everybody. Sorry about that. First off is our mission, and we're here to help foster and fortify an innovation and entrepreneur community coming out of HBAP, and to provide our members with the tools, knowledge, leadership, and confidence necessary to create and grow their businesses from the ground up. For those of you who are actually, I think everyone here is an HBAP student, but we do have an internal website, community calendar, and Slack channel. And I'm going to invite everyone to sign up for our newsletter. I'm going to paste this into the Zoom chat. Here's a link. Please fill out the newsletter so we can newsletter you. Yes. And the website for this is only accessible from within HBAP. You'll have to use your HBAP account to access that. And that's where we got a bunch of resources for everyone. I think I got everything there. And again, you know, I post in Slack constantly, so please pay attention to that. Susan. Oh, I cannot hear you.
It's because I got muted by somebody.
Yeah, I muted everyone. Sorry.
It's okay. All right. Well, welcome everyone. And mostly a reminder, but for you new folks too. As you can see from our mission, this is a place where we get to talk about and listen to new ideas, crazy ideas, feedback, all kinds of really cool stuff. And so we want to make sure that we keep our environment really collaborative and maintain confidentiality. So in light of that, it's all rights reserved by the presenter unless they tell us otherwise. And we abide by Francis Fry's 5-to-1 ratio, which is for every one piece of advice or counsel or feedback that might feel a little tart, we give 5 pieces of feedback that feel awesomely good for the person that we're giving it to. And then if anybody feels like there's a conflict of interest or something they're worried about, just reach out to Todd and me and we'll figure it out with you. Back to you, Todd.
Thanks, Susan. All right, so real quick, we like to do this at the beginning. Any new faces? I noticed a couple of them who are new to our club, our little group. 10-second introduction. Who are you? Where are you from? What do you do? How did you hear about us? And what is your superpower? So I'm going to quickly cold call Ming, who's got arguably one of the greatest backgrounds ever.
Yes.
Ming, real quick, 10 seconds.
Thank you.
Give us your story.
Well, I'm from like 11, if I'm correct, like January 20th, year 2020, and then like I am in automotive industry and looking into green energy, like working on a startup nonprofit about like green energy. So like that's me. Just graduated from HBAP in June.
Well, fantastic. Thanks for joining
Nice.
us. I also see, I see Jamal, you're here. Cold calling on you.
Hey, how's it going? So, name is Jamal. Cohort 10, graduated back in March. I'm from New York City, born and raised. Currently live in Westchester County. What do I do? I'm a software engineer at a big tech company. Know about startups for a while. Not a regular, but I try to pop in every time I can when I have some free time after work. So that's why I'm here today. Excited to be here. Superpower, I'm a coder, I can code. So I guess that's my superpower.
Jamal's got a really strong superpower. So, and Sharma, I don't know if you can hear me. I know your camera's not on, but I'm going to cold call you to see if you can comment.
Yeah, that's great. Thought that you cold call me. I was suspecting that you might. So, you know, I'll turn my camera on in a second. So I'm not new to this. I'm cohort 13. And if you do not recall, Todd, I have actually attended several of these startup, meetings in the past. That was almost a year back, right?
It's been a while.
It's been a while. So I had taken an academic leave of absence for a few months, and now I'm slowly trying to get back into the grind. So I'm not new, but for those of you, hello, everybody.
Welcome. Thank you. All right. So, quick announcements. Upcoming. Well, tonight we've got Neil Hennessy. This is a presentation I've been looking forward to for quite a while. Next week, we're going to be continuing this topic with Ashley Wilson. She will be talking about how she went from her idea to the App Store. I don't know if she did it in 8 weeks, but we'll find out. Again, the monthly social overtime is on October 5th. October 12th is Ben Dooley from Cohort 1. He will be talking about lessons from a second-time founder. Also, Ben Dooley was the first speaker that we had at HBAP Startups. October 19th, Roland has got a feedback session on this calendar. October 26th, a wonderful woman, Miko Yuk. She's going to talk about from the enterprise to a startup. And then we have our social overtime. And I'm just skipping ahead a little bit to something I'm kind of proud of. We've got Mary Spender, who is a famous YouTube musician. She's got over 600,000 subscribers. She's got over 50 million views on YouTube. She's going to be coming to talk to us about the 21st century musician. So if you like music, you are not going to want to miss December 14th. On that note, breakout room.
Todd,
Oh,
Todd,
yes.
just if you can go back one.
Did I forget one?
No, I just wanted to make note of the people that haven't been part of our brainstorming session. So we've had a couple of sessions the last month or so to really talk about what else do you all want to do and see and be part of in this group. And so you can see now that there's more of a mixture of different kinds of people. So we want people to come and get feedback on their ideas like Roland has. We want outside speakers to come in like Miko and Mary, and Miko's story is awesome. We also really want any of you that has an interest in telling us about something that you are an industry expert in. So for example, Ming, to come and talk to us about green energy, that would be really cool. Of course, that's an amazingly hot topic right now. So if any of you want to come and speak to us as an industry expert, we would love to have you come for a session on that as well.
Yes, let's peer pressure Ming. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, Ming, this is what happens. The first time you come here, we ask you to come back. Yeah.
Sure. I meant to join long time ago, but I quit my previous job in between job and I'm working on a nonprofit. So it's perfect time to share ideas. And I definitely want to see what's news and probably is a good mixed pot of new thought here.
I love it. Please.
Well,
all right. So now let's do some social breakout rooms. I will see you guys in about 5 or 6 minutes. All right, welcome back from your breakout rooms, everyone. I hope you had a great time. Just as a little reminder that we will be doing a little poll at the end and we'll hang out for some overtime. So please don't leave at the end. All right, so now the main event. Neil Hennessy is an HBAPper in Cohort 13. He is a data scientist who is currently working for VMware, where he's applying natural language processing classification models to better support strategic enterprise customers in VMware's Success 360 program. Prior to VMware, he was a data analyst at Amazon Web Services monetization department, and before that, he worked as a data analytics consultant and trainer with both Tableau and Salesforce. He holds a Bachelor of Mathematics from the University of Waterloo, where he majored in computer science and English literature, and I have been told to think of the University of Waterloo as the MIT of Canada. He enjoys boxing, dancing, reading, and writing about himself in the third person. Now, without further ado, if we could all please briefly unmute ourselves and give a warm round of applause to our very own Neil Hennessy. Neil.
you, everyone.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for this. Let me stop sharing. The floor is yours.
Okay, so let me start sharing. Share screen, screen one. Okay, no, I want to get the chat. I wanted to get the chat window up. Can you folks see my screen?
We can see your screen.
Okay. I can't find the chat. Okay, there we go. I just want to make sure I have the chat window open in case folks
You are in edit mode. I don't know if you want to be full screen or not.
have questions. No, I like to be able to see how many slides I have left.
Oh, okay.
So I leave a little strip on the side. But now I got the chat up, so you know, if folks have questions and I'm blabbing, you can drop them in the chat window. So thanks for having me. So a little bit of history about why I'm doing this. You know, I made a word game that I launched at the reunion event in June. And after doing that, I had a lot of folks talk to me with, you know, interest in how I developed things. How do you develop something that you want to work on, you know, both the iOS platform as well as an Android, and also the ins and outs of the publishing process. So once you've got something that's been developed, you know, how do you get it into the app stores? What are the pitfalls? You know, can you believe them when they say it only takes 3 days to review an app? You know, that kind of thing. So, you know, whatever I learned along the way that I can pass on in terms of, you know, best practices, and then also some places where I stumbled, you know, where I would want other folks to, you know, avoid the mistakes I made. So the, you know, about me, you know, I'm not going to go through this again. It's basically what Todd said, you know, summarized here. But what I will address, you know, prior to HBAP, I was at Tableau and Salesforce. I started HBAP, got a job at AWS as a data analyst, and then my VMware job actually starts in 2 weeks. So I just recently got hired on for that job. And the real reason that I made the app, now, I mean, maybe, you know, if I add enough new features, it becomes cool enough, goes viral, I get me some of that Wordle money and I don't have to work anymore, you know, that would be a good outcome. But what I was a little bit more realistic about expecting is that, you know, I have math and computer science in my background. I don't have any hands-on experience with, you know, modern AI, machine learning technologies. But given that, you know, this is all based on a machine learning algorithm that I created myself, I wanted to just show, you know, folks out there my capabilities, both as a developer and with, you know, AI, machine learning, and, you know, patents, all that kind of heavy math stuff, to, you know, just sort of showcase that and you know, along with all the other data analyst experience I had, you know, go and get me one of them jobs. And so initially at VMware, I'm going to be doing a lot of Tableau dashboarding, but they're opening the door to train me up and get me doing natural NLP classification models initially. So that will be my first dive into doing ML and AI stuff. And so that was, you know, sort of the real reason why I did this. Thankfully, it worked out exactly the way I had hoped. So that's definitely a bonus. And so now, we'll look at, you know, what the substance of the talk. So lots of folks have ideas, you know, since I started working on the app or just talking to people about it, you know, people in the program, people, you know, parents from my daughter's class, you know, lots of people have ideas for apps. But, you know, to get from that idea to stuff on, you know, the Apple Store and the Google Play Store, you know, there's a big black box of how do you develop that. And then there's also the question of, you know, what does it take to publish? Now, and before I started this process, you know, I had no idea what it would take to do the development or the publishing. So I was just sort of flying blind. You know, this is the first app I've ever created, you know, first thing I've ever published on the Play Stores. So, you know, before I get into some of the particulars, to give you the most important points, you know, so if somebody wants to drop off in 3 minutes, you'll have at least heard the most significant, important things that I have to say about this. When it comes to development, like we had a lot of stuff about a platform competition. There, you have to be on both. There is no competition. You have to be on both of these platforms. What you don't want to do is develop, on one of the particular platforms, either in Xcode for Apple, or in the Android Studio for Android, and then redo that in for the other environment. So what you do want to do is find a cross-platform IDE, integrated development environment, that is going to output to both platforms. That is what you want to do. And when it comes to publishing, the most important thing I can tell you there is that since the beginning of time, Google and Apple have said, yeah, it's just 3 days to get something on the App Store. If you have a very important app that you're launching, and the first time you hit the submit button is 3 days before, your big launch at a place like, the stage at that great big hall at Harvard, you're setting yourself up for failure. What my recommendation is that you give yourself 3 weeks before the launch. That's when the first time you should hit that submit button for both the Google and the Apple Store. And so I'm going to get into all kinds of nitty-gritty details there, but those are the biggest takeaways. Number one, submit stuff well in advance, because it takes much longer than they say. And then in order to be able to deal with bugs or things that come up, and go through a few cycles of submission, you need to give yourself lots of time. You don't want to just wait, if it's on a Sunday and then put it up there on the Thursday. So those are some of the biggest takeaways. And I'm going to go through just a list of questions about, first of all, for development, what are the most burning questions? What IDE do I use? What kind of equipment do I need, etc. And then I'll look at the publishing process and what kind of assets and extra stuff do you need, in addition to the actual code base. That's the actual code that's going to be running. Legal, as well as what you're going to need from a legal perspective, just to get things up and available on the app stores. So as I'm going along, feel free to drop questions in the chat. That's usually the easiest, or you can just hand up or come off mute. It's pretty casual, but also try and stop at key points to let folks digest and maybe ask questions. All right, so a bit of a timeline and more details about what this thing is, where I came up with it, why I'm working on it. Back in the year 2000, when I was a senior in my computer science program, I had an artificial intelligence class, and for my final project, I created a nonsense word generator that I called Jabber, after the poem Jabberwocky in Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, which is probably the most famous nonsense poem in English. And so I wanted to automate that process of creating these nonsense words that sound like English, and so did some statistical analysis of letter patterns in the language, came up with an algorithm that worked. And I'm actually going to show you the original one. It was published as a Java applet. This is dead code. I had to go and download a JDK from basically 20 years ago to get this thing to run. And so, this is what it looked like. And so it creates these nonsense words from a cloud of floating letters. So, this was out there, on my website at the time. I think it was 2013, all browsers cut off applet functionality. So that was when it was kind of dead code. So I know they talked about like archaeology of code and at the June reunion. I had to do some of that myself. I had to dig through. I was digging through all the old JDK. No, that one's not old enough. That one's not old enough. That one's not old enough. So anyway, so this is what it was, and I was happy that it got published in MIT's electronic literature collection. So even though I went to the MIT of Canada, my name is now officially linked to the real MIT of MIT. I was very proud of that. But you know, it's now, but then it was dead code just 2 years later, and you know, I hadn't done anything since then. So October, during our HBAP first immersion, we had some focus for several sessions on AI and machine learning. I was thinking, okay, I have this machine learning thing. What way might I be able to, you know, turn this into something that could make money? So Wordle had just started to blow up, and so I thought maybe I could turn it into a word search game instead. So instead of just trying to produce nonsense, like let people interact with it and poke the real words. Now, one thing that I hadn't planned on is that when I opened the development environment to demo it, you know, 15 minutes ago, it wouldn't open because there's some problem with the repository. And so I'm glad this is not a presentation on how to use Unity, the development environment. So I can't show you a live video that I initially made because you have to have one of these. Well, you don't have to, but you can have one of these with your Google listing. And so this is, I don't know if the audio is on, but this will actually be a video of my daughter playing it. So you poke the words. If it's a real word, it turns green. If it's not, it turns yellow. Like that was SAG something else. And so if it turns yellow, you can swipe letters off the left and right to, you know, score for smaller words. So that's the basic game. And so that is my daughter actually playing it with me, sort of hovering over with the camera, doing the voiceover. So that was the end result. What became the game. And then, but you know, to get from the idea in October to launching the game at the HBAP reunion, there was a lot of stuff that happened in between there. So it was when I found out about the reunion, I thought, okay, this is the perfect opportunity for me to turn my idea into reality. You know, a great occasion to launch it. Lots of HBAPers around, good stuff there. So in April, I started to think about, you know, what I wanted to do in terms of development and what I would need to do in terms of patents to, you know, protect the earning power of this game if it turned into something that people wanted to play. And so, you know, part of it involved, you know, finding my old code, you know, figuring out what I actually had in Java, looking at different, you know, development environments, talking to a lawyer about the patents. By May, I decided I would develop it in Unity, which is a cross-platform game development engine. And so that's when I started, you know, seriously developing the game. After about a month, I was convinced, okay, I have, like, you know, people call it minimal viable product. Well, this was my MVG, minimal viable game. It is a game. It may not like take over Wordle, you know, but it is an actual game that where the game mechanics works. And then at that point I said, okay, you know, now that I, you know, can produce a game with this algorithm, I can work on the patent. So I wrote the patent draft, sent it to the attorney on June 1st so that there would be, you know, some lead time so she could do what she needed to do to take my draft and turn it into something, you know, legally viable. I guess I've been using that term, viable. And then I focused on, you know, the final polish on the game, and then, you know, the submission process to make sure that things were ready to go up. June 16th was when I submitted the app to both Apple and Google. And then 10 days later, the patent was filed and the game launched from the stage at Harvard and on both Play stores before I was on the stage at Harvard. So that was key. Now, some of the things that actually got me there is some looking back, it's like, wow, it seems like there was some luck involved. But one of the things that I was sort of really happy about was giving myself that leeway. And I had done nothing, in terms of research. All I knew is that it always says 3 days everywhere, but I was like, you know what, I've been around software for a long time as a developer and other roles, and it's like, I don't believe that 3 days. I was like, I'm going to give myself 10. And so fortunately it worked out. But like I said, in my initial like do's and don'ts, I would give myself even more lead time if I were to do this again. And I'll talk about some of the nitty gritty details there. But that's just basic overview, what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. And so now I'm going to start, going through more details about this part of the process. Excuse me. So I had legacy code that was in Java. And so my initial thoughts when I looked at, okay, what does Android do? Android does Java. Okay, maybe this is the easiest way to go about it. So I started poking around in Android Studio, brought in whatever legacy Java code, started dealing with all of the stuff that had been deprecated, which was almost everything. And then trying to figure out, okay, well, I've got the underlying mechanics there. Now I need to work on it on the UI. And then I thought, I need to talk to some people to figure out if this is even wise. So I spoke to 2 people about the development, one of whom is on this call, who I want to call out and thank, Roland. Roland started the gaming analytics channel in our HBAP Slack and has been responsible for most of the activity. And so I posted on there just saying, hey, if you were going to make a game, for both operating systems, like what would you do? And so Roland met with me. I showed him, what I had. I talked about maybe doing things in Android Studio. He said, no, you need to do. It's probably better to just use a game, a game engine. And so he sent me one that he had suggested that was like a low code or no code one. Which I looked at, and it was okay, but it seemed there were some limitations that I felt were there because it was no code, that I felt maybe other game engines would help me avoid. I also spoke to another friend of mine who is a super experienced developer. He worked for IBM on the Watson team, doing AI stuff back when the big black computer that fills the whole room and beats people at Jeopardy was the thing that was cool in AI. Was a developer manager at Amazon, and his most recent role is doing natural language processing for insurance contracts with an AI startup as the CTO. So somebody who really knows development. Because even though, I did study computer science, most of my jobs have not been as a software developer. They've been in training, consulting, that kind of thing. So, I was a bit rusty. The last real code I had written was in Java. I did do some Python stuff at AWS, but, I needed advice on, what to do so I wasn't going to waste my time. And so he said, okay, you did get to Hello World in Android Studio, but throw that out. You have to do a modern game engine. Not for the biggest reason is this part. You don't want to waste hours on porting something from Android Studio into Xcode. It's double the effort, and then you also have double the maintenance costs. That's crazy. You need to do something in a game engine that outputs to both, plus others if you need them. And so that was, the one significant thing. And then because I was making a game, game development environments take care of all of what they call the physics for you. which was great because when I made that thing in Java in 2000, every time letters hit each other, I had to go and relearn trigonometry so I would know what angles, they would bounce off each other. And so even though I was in my final year in my math degree, like, basic trigonometry is not something we did in, fourth year math. So those are the two things. Takes care of your, it'll take care of, cross-platform. And then for folks that are interested in gaming, you don't have to do any of the basic, physics of how things bounce around, managing sprites, that turn into other sprites. It's made for making games. So those are the two things that convinced me this is totally the wrong way to go. So if you have some kind of idea like this, don't do it. What was the correct, the do method? Find a cross-platform environment that is going to create an app that suits what you're up to, that will output to both platforms. And so, way back when Java was released, it was it was write once, run everywhere. And it wasn't never quite that, but it got pretty close. And that dream is still alive because the tagline for React is learn once, run everywhere, or something like that. So they're still still using the same thing. Although, instead of just working across different browsers now, these are environments that work across the two main mobile platforms. Now, I'll start with the games part though. The two most serious ones for game development: Unreal for all of your super heavy first person shooters. I'm not actually a gamer myself, so I don't know any of the current ones, but that's what Unreal is for, super serious 3D gaming. Unity is more for, and Unity does 3D great too, for sure, no question. But it tends to be sort of the lighter platforms. So instead of, PlayStations and Xboxes, this is more for mobile gaming, although it does output and, to all those other, heavy duty gaming platforms if it's necessary. So between the two of them, the reason I chose Unity, because it tended to be used more for mobile gaming. And if I ever needed help with what I was doing, if there's something I didn't have the time to do, or my capabilities weren't where they needed to be, there's a lot, because those two are the most popular. Unity is the number one. If I needed to, I'm a developer myself, but if I had to pay somebody, you can get them real cheap because there's lots of them out there. Basic supply and demand. Also for support, nobody does good documentation anymore. Documentation is, questions that are posted on Stack Exchange or on, whatever the Unity or Unreal forums are. So, so for the ones that are most popular, every time there was an error message that popped up in Unity, I was able to just plunk that into Google and then find the answer on the forums. I was desperately doing that just before we started. Wasn't able to apply that fix to get into the Unity environment with my game to show you, but I have confidence that in the 10 minutes after the session, I'll be able to sort that out. So really great support in those terms. Now, C# is the programming language that underlies both of those gaming engines. So that's what you have to either have the capabilities to do yourself, or the person you're going to hire. If they're not already really good in these engines, this is the minimal thing you need to be able to do in order to be effective and make a game in those platforms. So that's gaming, which is what I was up to. What more people on this call are going to be up to is business apps. So to talk a little bit about the two different versions, both of the engines use JavaScript. So anybody that has a lot of experience making modern websites, has used JavaScript here and there. So it is a very, very, very popular and common language where there's a ton of capability out there. JavaScript is often the first language that a lot of people learn because they, made a website, then tried to do something a little bit more complicated. That meant you were using JavaScript. And JavaScript is about, as old as Java is. It came just a few years later. So it's been around for a long time, as long as Java and C# has. These two are the main platforms out there that people use to develop business apps. A bit of history about them. React has been around longer than Flutter. React came out of the development needs of Facebook when they wanted to modernize and standardize the Facebook experience across websites and mobile devices. And so as a lot of things these days in software, what they did internally to make this work was something that could then be offered, their own internal infrastructure was something that everyone else needed to do. So React was the first one that really did that. React was around to just do website stuff, DHTML and whatever the latest versions of it is. And then React Native was extending that so that you could use native phone technology. So the difference between React and React Native is React can do stuff that you can do in a browser. React Native can do everything you can do in a browser, but then can also like make your phone vibrate, make phone calls, things that don't happen from a browser on a laptop, etc. So that came from Facebook. Flutter is again built-in JavaScript, uses JavaScript libraries, writes to native code, but Flutter is sponsored, owned. React Native, sorry, it's open source. It came from Facebook. Flutter is a commercial Google product, so it is still part of the alphabet world, and it's just sort of Google's version of the same thing. Now, I haven't built anything in either of those. What if I had to, without just sort of not just flipping a coin or being completely ignorant, but based on my understanding and what I've seen working with other environments and the Google, Android, and Apple and iOS, I would probably go with React. It's been around a little bit longer, and it's not owned by Google's biggest competitor. Apple does not play nice with Google, Android, and/or Windows. So I would hesitate to and it's based on some personal experience I've had, even developing the stuff that I did. Facebook is less of an enemy of Apple than Google is. And so I think they do less stuff to mess with React than they would with Flutter. Yeah. And, for folks that have questions about those two specifically, I'm happy to field any questions, but I also can go to that other buddy of mine who I couldn't convince to come to this session to give solid advice. The guy who's actually built apps and things like that for business purposes. So I'm not the biggest fount of knowledge when it comes to those two, but I do have access to more. So I welcome any questions in regards to this. Dart, not JavaScript. From what I saw, it said JavaScript. It's written in JavaScript and then outputs to, unless Dart is some Google specific libraries in JavaScript. But my understanding is it's JavaScript. So yeah, there's no Python on here because none of these things use Python. Any questions on the different platforms? So amazing that I played each platform in a short period. Well, I haven't used all the platforms. The only one I've used in depth is Unity, the one that I chose to do the development in. I know a bit about the other platforms just from research and just being in the nerd industry for a long time. But I'll look into the thing about the Dart, like, when I looked at Flutter, it said, hey, this is JavaScript. So folks that have JavaScript capabilities, can work in React and Flutter. And, I said React, but my buddy that, just is the CTO at that AI firm, he says Flutter. And as a developer, I love Google. I love everything they do, and because it's a company that was built by developers for developers. And so, their documentation is amazing, like all their error messages are beautiful with actual like links to where you can go to correct it. So I prefer to work with Google technology as much as possible. But just knowing that you're the primary, one of the primary platforms I'm trying to produce stuff for is their one of their mortal enemies, that gives me some pause. Anything on this before I move on? Okay. All right, so
I was, it's rolling here. I actually have a question. So for the Unity, so I know like it goes to mobile app, but does it produce a web app somehow?
Yes, it will produce it in HTML5 as well, so you can put it on a website.
Nice.
I haven't got around to doing that, but HTML5 for Unity is one of the outputs. So absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, so the cost for the different platforms, the Unity, the one that I ended up choosing, they don't care until you're making more than $100,000 a year, and then they want a slice. So you can use the free version of Unity until you start making serious coin. And it's the same thing with Unreal. I don't know exactly where Unreal's threshold is, but it's the same idea. You start making money, then you start giving us some money. The other two platforms, I'm not sure about how much they cost, and whether or not it's the same idea where there's a step up cost once you start making money in a commercial sense. But that's something I'll also look up. Just make notes in my parking. Follow up on some of this stuff and post it on the Slack channels and stuff like that. Anything that I don't know in this environment. And sorry, I thought there was a hand up.
Yeah, this was DJ. I had a question, but I guess you primarily use Unity. I don't know if you had any experience with Flutter, because what I've heard just through the grapevine is it's got its own limitations. So wasn't sure how much of experience you had with Flutter and what was your take on it?
Yeah, I have zero experience with either React or Flutter when it comes to actually using them beyond just research. Given that my buddy prefers Flutter, I think it's just because in general Google is so good at providing great development environments for developers. Again, because it was software nerds that invented an algorithm that is where they started, and so their audience is still developers like the founders, and so it's just really great to work with Google Code, Google APIs, Google documentation, Google error messages, all that kind of stuff. Now Flutter, whereas React, it's React is the one that's been around longer. There's more, there's more support, there's more stuff on the forums out there, so it has a bigger install base, I think. But they're both great platforms. You're not going to go wrong, either way. you know, it just comes down to preference. I would go with React. You know, my buddy says Flutter. And again, like, you know, between Unity and Unreal, like, again, if you're making a game, you know, they both are great. You know, I would have to know, you know, what exactly the app you were trying to make, you know, what some of the basic functionality is before I would do a deeper dive to be able to say, oh, you know what, you know, Flutter, you know, has better interoperability with, you know, these kinds of APIs, and that's what you're doing. Maybe that's what you want to do. Now, in general, in terms of limitations, either Flutter or React, they're not going to give you the same control over, you know, primitive technology in the phone that Xcode and Android will. So if you see Apple, you know, I think they're bringing out, you know, the latest iPhone sometime soon. If you see them presenting something on stage, you know, next month when they're launching the new iPhone, and you're like, that has to be a part of my app, then guess what? That brand spanking new feature that is on iPhone, you know, there isn't an equivalent one on Android yet. And so, you know, that's where you will start to see these limitations. You know, if you're using one of these environments, if there's something that is, you know, Apple only, you know, then that's going to be something that's not going to, you know, be interoperable for both of them. Now, I know that, you know, the ideal is to just write once and have it go everywhere, but they do have ability to, you know, customize certain parts of the app. If there is, you know, a to die for feature that comes out in the latest iPhone, you know, there still is ways you can, you know, maintain, you know, a primary code base and have branching where you want to be able to use the, you know, you know, and I keep saying, you know, Apple, because they are the best at UI. You know, they're the ones that bring out the brand new great stuff, and then we have to wait till, you know, people like me that are more developer minded have to wait till Android and or Windows platforms copy them.
Yeah, so my concern was like more got to do with abstractness part of it, and sometimes people appreciate the abstractness, but the abstractness also takes away the ability to control and understand exactly what's happening, right? So you're spot on in terms of React Native being there for a long time. Now it's kind of established community, right? It's well kind of tested out from that perspective. It's just that from a Flutter perspective, I really didn't get a lot of exposure and was just curious in that aspect, that if it's way too abstract, then for the first time developers, yeah, it's a great rapid development tool, but then sometimes it becomes way too abstract for to be able to then control it, right? Or have a proper control over it. And then also, I don't know if it really makes any difference, especially in terms of security. So I know you might not have the answer, but your buddy who you said is an expert, maybe posting some of his thoughts later on in a Slack channel would be very useful to me.
Yeah, for sure. I made some more notes on your question, and yeah, I'll follow up. Todd's in the Flutter camp, faster and newer. Yeah. And hey, you know, it's either way you go, you know, Facebook and Google have both done a pretty good job at creating apps. So, you know, like either way, you're going to be okay. But, you know, I would stick with those top two as opposed to, you know, going elsewhere. There's some other stuff that MIT makes that's okay, but it starts to, you know, not have that community support that makes it easy to find answers when things aren't going right. Anything else here? All right, so you know, one of the other reasons that, you know, as a, you know, developer IT nerd, that I like the you know, Windows and Android platforms is they tend to be easier to work with. One of the things you have to realize about Apple is that no matter what they do in the world, they're only their only focus is to sell you devices. That's it. Everything else is just, you know, icing on whatever cake. That's their only reason to exist. Now, I, you know, lived, and I say lived because I had to change my ways a little bit in a Windows/Android world. You know, all of the, like, I own a Windows laptop, and all of my other devices, you know, router, you know, Chromecast for my TV, the Windows Assistant, the repeater in my daughter's room, everything is Google and Android. Because I'm a developer, I love all the great UI stuff that Apple does. I hate how much they lock things down and how difficult they make it to work with Apple stuff as a developer. So some of this stuff may not be relevant if you are a Mac person and, you know, you're dealing with all things in the Mac world. But you know, if you're not a developer yourself and you want to pay developers, you know, like, they tend to be more like me than fully bought into the Apple environment. So some of this, if you're happy developing on Macs and you live in an Apple world, may not be totally relevant, because you're okay if you are Mac centric, Apple centric, you're okay. You can you can develop for Android or iOS. But if the opposite doesn't quite work. So for the Android platform, you only pay to publish. So to actually, you know, create something like a file that you can install on your Android device, you don't have to pay anybody anything, and you don't have to unlock anything. You don't have to register IDs anywhere. You can just put it on your phone, install it. The $25 you pay is for publishing your app on the Google Play Store. So you can develop, build, and publish to the app stores on either Windows or Mac freely for the Android platform. You're good. I already mentioned you can test on any Android device. You don't need you know, to register anything anywhere. It's really open and easy. The Mac side of it, or the iOS side of it, not so much. Unless you're willing to unlock a phone or jailbreak, or sorry, whatever they call it, you have to pay before you can even run a test app on an iOS device. So that $100, it has to come out of your pocket at the beginning of. Did I go with a DUNS number? That's
the reason why I'm asking. Like, Apple's got two categories of developer. You've got the personal, or you've got an organization. The organization requires a DUNS number. Did you go that route, or did you do personal? No,
whatever was easiest and cheapest is what I did. So I would have done personal. I don't even remember making that choice, but I would have been personal for sure. So the DUNS number, you know, like some of like, I did it the easiest and cheapest and quickest way possible. And when I get into a little bit more about the publishing process, I'll talk about places where I was able to take shortcuts, that if you're developing a business app that wants to be fully legally protected, all the rest of it, where you would not want to take shortcuts. So I definitely did a personal dev account. It's actually got my name on it as a developer, like on the apps.
And it's my understanding though that the organization then has the organizational protections in terms of intellectual property and, you know, liability, whereas if you're an individual, you don't. And again, it depends on what you're doing. If you're making a game, that's one thing. If you're making a health app, get an organization between you and the
yeah, so this is something you need to discuss with your attorney.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect example. Now, you know, when it came, now I did have a discussion with an attorney, and, you know, just to say like, hey, is this worth, you know, making a patent for, you know, and the answer was yes. So that was the advice I was given by the attorney I talked to about how to protect what I was up to, you know, from a game perspective. And so, Gary, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I have been, oh my God, for 7-8 years. I pay $100 a year to Apple to be a developer, just to get the betas, I used Xcode. I did a boot camp in 2017 to build an 8-week boot camp, which was really interesting. So yeah, I have been in that world, and it was really interesting. I'm not a fan of Xcode. I love Swift. When Swift came out, that was my big motivation because I didn't really like Objective-C. But I also have Android devices and I could do both. But yeah, what's interesting is we did a final app in our thing, and we split into teams and we presented it, but the woman never took it. 5 years ago, she never took it, any of it, and made it an app. I still have the code, and I'm curious to know if, and I guess I need to talk to legal people. Like 5 years, she's not done anything. Like, can I, kind of like what you did, go back and dig up this code and make it a current app and put it in the store? That would be very interesting for me to figure out.
You know, there's all kinds of stuff there that I've read about, but you know, I'm not an attorney, so I'm not going to say go ahead and do it. It's all yours. You know, like copyright doesn't apply, trademark doesn't apply, patents don't apply. You know, do what you want with it. Again, you know, like that's something you would want to discuss with an attorney.
Yeah, and the other funny bit, very quick, the guy that taught the class, he's the guy that developed Homebrew, and he was my mentor. So, and his idea was to do this boot camp and then hire us to create this company called Codebase and have us work for him. And that all fell apart. So it was a great idea, and it was free for eight weeks, because they didn't have a teaching license, so they had to do a pilot program, which I was in, and then so it was all real interesting. But again, I just pay the $100 a year to Apple, and I get all the beta stuff, and I don't mind. I've been in that world, but I appreciate Windows and Android. I have all of it, so it's interesting though. Thank you.
So you know, you're well positioned. Like the easiest thing to do is to own a Mac computer, own an iPhone, and own an Android device, and then you can do all the development and all the testing you need. You're good. So you would be in a really good position to develop, you know, use one of these platforms and develop the cross-platform app, because the you know, you can develop, build, publish on Windows and Mac, and you can develop on Mac and publish on Mac for iOS. So that's the perfect scenario. I had to do a lot of workarounds because I was, you know, Windows and Android. Was there another question?
Nope. No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So so you have to pay that $100 up front, even to just run code, you know, as a test on your iPhone, unless you're willing to do things I was not. I didn't want to jailbreak anything. I didn't want to get in trouble with Apple because I was trying to put something on their app store, you know, and I didn't want to get into some like, hey, we've, you know, shut down your account kind of nonsense. So I tried to do it by the book. And then of course that allows you to publish as well, but you do have to pay that up front even before you can run anything on your iPhone. And then that also means that you can't just like send a file to anybody and they can put it on their iPhone. You have to get a specific code off their phone and put it in your Apple developer account in order for them to be able to test it. So it also makes testing a little bit more complicated. And
I think it might have to be tethered, like a lightning cable or something like that. It needs to be physically connected, it doesn't.
No, well now you can like.
Well,
you can
in 2017 it did, so I don't know.
Well, they've done a little bit different between then and now. You can just send them the way it worked with the build environment I did is then there was a download page that it created, and then they would download the code, and then it looks under the hood to see, hey, are you in that developer account? And if you are, as a test device, then you're good.
Okay, great.
So since we've already opened more of this discussion, I'm going to talk a little bit about this one, own at least one Apple device. So I was trying to do this, as cheaply as possible. And I found out that you need an Apple device to get an Apple developer account. And so, trying to do it as cheaply as possible. My wife works for the RealReal, the luxury resale website, as a jewelry authenticator, and she needed a new phone. They use their phones at work to take pictures of the jewelry, and so it's like, and she had a super old Android, so it's like, all right, I need this for this Apple account. You need, the best phone the best camera on a phone. Great, you can get this. But then she got the phone, great pictures for work. I tried to use her phone to create the developer account, but because it was tied, the device was tied to her Apple ID, I couldn't register a developer account on someone else's Apple device. And so then it got too complicated, and I was like, fine, keep your iPhone, I will get one myself. Remember what I said, that Apple's only purpose for everything they do is just because I had to make this app. So, so you have to own an Apple device in order to get the developer account. And then you can develop on Windows or Mac for any of those environments. But when you build and publish, they have to either be done on Mac hardware, so that means a Mac laptop or whatever else they have, or cloud or virtual versions through VMware, or cloud versions, but it has to be run on a Mac. And I'll talk a little bit more about this, and I don't want to get too deep into it as it's a big rabbit hole, but I want to at least touch on what your options are. If you are like me, a developer type that likes the Windows and Android world for interoperability, ease of use, all that kind of jazz, and ease of use as from a developer's perspective, then what you can do for Mac building and publishing, first, buy a Mac. Just give up. I was telling a friend of mine who's a developer about all my woes, and he was like, if this thing makes some money,
I think we lost Neil.
first thing you should do is buy a Mac. And I was like, that's what I told my friend. So just make your life easy.
Neil, I think we're having some network connectivity problems.
Can you hear me now?
Can everyone hear you? I think.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're cutting in and out.
Okay, I'm gonna try a headset, so that makes it better.
Can you hear us, Neil? Oh, you're muted. We cannot hear you. Your Zoom is muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. I think it was the network. I think there was a network
Okay.
glitch.
Okay, so a buddy of mine, after I told him about all my woes, said, if this app makes any money, the first thing you should do is buy a Mac. And I said, yeah, that's exactly what I said I was going to do. And so, that's the easiest, it's the most expensive, but you just install the IDE, connect it to the repository you're using to check in your code, and then you can build whenever you need and do the publishing from there. Another option, you can run a Mac virtually using VMware, my new employer, plug for them. You can get it for free if you say it's a personal license, but if you're building a business app and trying to make money from it, you probably want to pay the $150. I was not in that. I decided not to do this because it is hard. Installing the VM is not easy. It's a pain. Then you have to install the OS on top of that, and then the IDE. And so I was under serious time pressure as well. So I wanted things to be cheap and quick. And I was like, that is a rabbit hole I'm never going to come out of, trying to get that working. So I looked at these options, some of these options. There's my former employer, AWS. You can have a virtual Mac that runs in the cloud. You pay subscription. The cheapest one that looked useful was about $50 up to, somewhere over 100 per month. Complexity, some of them, if you tell them like, hey, I want this for Flutter or whatever, they'll install it because they know why people want these things. But you may have to install the IDE yourself. The option that I went was the cheapest and easiest in my opinion. I went with a built-in cloud service. So there are some services like this website called Code Magic that will do your Mac building cloud for any of those three platforms. I didn't use that one. I used Unity's own cloud build service. That was for the 0.095 cents per minute for the testing and builds that I did. I did it for $38. VirtualBox, yeah, that's Oracle's. You can also install Mac OS there for sure. But their commercial licensing is really expensive, and they make you buy 100 of them to start. So I don't know if you can, if you're a commercial entity and you only need one, if there's another pricing option, but and besides, VMware is better. I only work for companies that are in the top of the Magic Quadrant, Todd, not those other ones that are in that Magic Quadrant, but not in the super leader part. Again, for your personal, but if you're doing things in a corporate way, I would look into it, before I just use the personal one. It's again due diligence. You want to protect yourself. You don't want something going out there, and then they have a way of seeing it, and then going, you now owe us all this extra money because you didn't pay the licensing fee up front. So so I know that you can get a commercial one-person license for VMware for $150. VirtualBox, I wasn't able to figure out that information, so that's another thing I'll put on the I'll put in my list. All right, so now that was the easiest to set up in terms of, I used Unity's version control system, so everything was already sort of really tightly integrated. So that was what I found easiest and quickest. The one thing it did involve was creating developer keys on a Mac. Now, to create developer keys for Android, you can do it on any device. To create developer keys for iOS, it has to be done on Mac hardware, and it can't be done on a phone. It needs to be done on, whatever their laptops are called these days and whatever their desktops are called these days. So I tried to do this cheap and easy. So I actually went to the Apple store that's on Broadway, just by the bottom of Central Park. And I had my instructions on how to get these keys made. And so, I'm there, and I felt so out of place. It's the Mac store. So, there was a woman behind me who had like 3 people helping her, who was like, I need this because I'm a designer. I need to do video. I need to do audio. I need to do graphic design. I'm like, great, you're in the right place. And so she was like the remember PC and Mac guy. She was the Mac guy and I was the PC guy, this nerd trying to go in there and get my keys for free so I don't have to pay anymore to Apple. And so I'm almost sweating, and then I got to one part where it said, okay, now you need the system admin login. And I was like, damn it, I was almost there, because there's no way I'm gonna convince one of these geniuses in the Genius Bar, like, could you just log in here so I can get my keys? They'd be like, get out of here, nerd. So I wasn't able to do that. So I had to borrow a friend's Mac. Luckily, during the pandemic, at one point, I had delivered a laptop to her because her laptop broke. She couldn't get another one delivered quick enough, and she had COVID. So I actually picked it up from the store and brought it to her. So she owed me a favor. So I bought bagels one morning, went over to her place and said, don't ask me what I'm doing. I'm not hurting your computer, but I just need to make these keys. Oh, and can you log in? So, but I did want to, my wife was very skeptical about me spending any money on these things. And so all of a sudden we have these 2 iPhones that we didn't really need. And so in the iPhone, they give you a sticker. And so when I came home after I, done all this stuff and got the keys and told her I was going to the Mac store, I actually put the Apple sticker on our Windows laptop. And so when she came in, she saw that sticker and was like, because I told her I went to the Apple store to get, some keys for free, and then I come home with this, $2,000 laptop. So thankfully, she did. It was just a joke. So I had to. So there was one thing I still had to do on an actual Mac. Some services like CodeMagic will let you do that part of it too. So so this could be a completely Macless option. All right, so I've said enough on that. I know from experience of who's installed my app that most of the people in HBAP are at least iPhone users and probably all Macs. Oh, there we go. So Todd, there we go. So you saw I
Googled it. I've only ever used VirtualBox free. I never even thought that. I always thought it was free, but it's clearly not.
For personal. Yeah. So I don't know if you can talk them down to like a 1-person license, but yeah, that's crazy to me. All right. So sorry. Any other questions on this? I didn't want to go too in depth if this is more than people need at this point, but just know that it's going to be a headache if you're Windows based and trying to do things without a Mac.
I do have a question about CodeMagic. Have you used CodeMagic? What was that like?
I have not.
Okay.
This is what I did. I used Unity Cloud Build, which was more expensive, but it looked easier to set up because I was using the Unity platform and the Unity repository. So code checking in and checking out from there. So it just, to me, seemed easiest and quickest. CodeMagic looks like a great website or great service. I love the fact that they also let you create those developer keys, because that was an annoying thing that I just described running around and buying bagels for. But it looks like a great service to me, and this is their price. It's so it's even a little bit cheaper than even the Unity one is. So I haven't actually tried to use it. It does look like it takes a lot more configuration to get up and running, but that's because it's a service you can use. They keep it very flexible and open, to be able to plug a lot of different things in as like, so maybe maybe you're incorporating some other things in the code base that you need to, it's more of a it's more of a, you know, more of a build tool that tries to stay a little bit more open. But that openness meant that I wasn't going to get where I needed to be as quickly as if I just use Unity. But it looks like a great platform, particularly if you need to do things that are not just out of the box with whatever it is you're doing. If you want to plug in other modules and things like that, that maybe you have to do a bit of massaging, a little JavaScript coding yourself. You know, you can, you know, have post-build tasks that run, you know, bringing in other code bases and things like that. So it's looks more flexible, it looks cheaper, but you know, there's a cost in terms of complexity of actually getting things running and configured.
Thank you. Thanks.
Anything else on this Windows and Mac nightmare? By the way, I was ultimately very pleased that I bought that iPhone, because it meant that this picture was taken with the best phone camera out there when I got to the so that's when I was like, you know what, that was so much better a picture than I would have got with my crappy Galaxy S9. So so I kind of calmed down in my Apple anger. The reason that the cost that I only spent $38 is that I didn't build very often in Apple. I did most of my testing on my Android device, and so it was just a few builds. Like, is this working? Is this okay on my iPhone? All right. So it was not I didn't do too many builds, and like I said, most of my testing was in Android. So it was just largely like, okay, is this working? Yeah, I can publish this now. So I was very conservative, and my primary build, what I was doing as I'm testing and working, was in the one that is plugged into my computer, the Android device. This was only when I had to, it was like, okay, I'm ready to publish. All right, so people are dropping off. I want to get through some more of this. So how long does it take apps to get on the app stores? What they say and what's out there, when I only did a very cursory glance, is 3 days. That's what they say. That's a total lie. I gave myself 10 days just based on my own hunch. You know, there's a lot of data out there. We talk about data, but there's always gut feelings. So I was like, 3 days doesn't sound good to me. So the actual approval, so when I put it into Apple, they turned it around in 2 days. There was things that was messed up with my icon, so they actually rejected it. And then I made the fix, resubmitted it. The update was approved the same day. Later on, I had to pull out the Google mobile ads because they worked perfectly on my iPhone when they were test ads. As soon as I turned the switch in my Google AdMobs account to say these should be live ads, the ads stopped working on everyone's iPhone. And so and at that point, it was like 4 days before the so this would have been, to show you on the calendar, June. So this was where this was when I submitted. This is when the first one got rejected. By the 19th, it was approved. I turned the live ads on I think it was Tuesday. Everything stopped working on iPhone. I did not have time to debug it, so I just pulled the ads, and then that was approved by 23. So within those 10 days, I was able to get 3 approvals and still, or three responses, and still have a couple days left over. So everything I said bad about Apple prior, about development environment, I take back when it comes to the service from their app store. Just incredible. And they tell you step by step through the whole process, this is where it's at, and you know, this is what the next step is. Really good. Google, on the other hand, was a nightmare. So I gave myself 10 days. It took 8 days for the app to get approved. So I submitted it on the 16th. It got approved on, submitted it the 15th, and then it was the 23rd that it got published. So long story short, also when I contacted support, they said 10+ days is typical. So, and then subsequent updates I made were 4 to 5 days to actually get them on the App Store. So that's why I say the 21 days, because that gives you enough time for, if it takes 10 days to approve, and then you have to do 2 updates, that I felt was safe given, and that's minimal. Now, note that I put in the simplest app you could possibly do. Collected no information, connected to no external sites, no purchases, subscriptions, advertisements. So having any of that stuff takes longer for the review. Assets, things you need to accompany a store listing. You need some graphic design, icons at different sizes and styles to support different OS versions. Screenshots at different sizes for different devices. You need some text. For an app preview for Google, you need, you can make a YouTube video. For Apple, they have this thing called an app clip, which I didn't make for mine. It's not a video, it's actually code. It's a small version of your app. It didn't create that it didn't create that automatically in Unity, so I just ignored it. That's something you might not want to ignore for a business app. Does my game work without an app in any mobile browser? No. It has to be installed as an app at the moment. I haven't done anything for the DHTML versions.
And did you do it for just phones, or did you do it on tablets also? Or
It
just
works
phones?
on tablets, automatically on tablets as well.
Okay, great.
Hey, sorry, Neil, for interrupting, but I'm just looking at the time. We're running a little bit long. I know you have a bunch more slides.
Yeah, I'll kind of zoom through them. So you need a physical address for your privacy policy, and then as well, if you collect any money, you're gonna have to put in a physical address in there. And you need a legal privacy policy hosted on a website. So, and you have to also have the website and email address. Legal requirements. The privacy policy is very complicated. Because I was doing everything as simply as possible, I went to a website called Termly that gives you a Q&A wizard. Are you doing this? Yes, no. Are you doing this? Yes, no. Are you doing this? Yes, no. Spits out what they say is a valid privacy policy. Now, you have monetization, you collect and store personal data, publish the apps internationally. All those things can make things complicated. If you have complex privacy policy needs, don't do what I did. Consult an attorney. Again, this is for something I made proof of concept, something for my portfolio. Maybe it might make some money. For something like Susan's construction app, you don't want to be just using Termly and thinking everything is okay. So definitely consult an attorney on that one. Also, as you're in the publishing process, there's a couple steps where you're talking about license agreements that are legal documents, and I just said yes, okay. Things about encryption, things about age restrictions. To be safe, if I was doing a business app, I would also have an attorney review those choices in the publishing part about the license agreements, etc., to make sure you're not doing something that's going to affect your ability to make money from your app. Publishing and patents. I was told that if you publish your app that has patentable technology in it prior to actually filing a patent, that can affect your ability to enforce that patent at a later time if somebody steals your tech or does what Gary's trying to do. So what you can do to cheap and easy and quick, what I did was file the provisional patent. Those only cost $75 if you are like me, kind of poor and have never filed a patent before. Someone like Gordon Chu, who has millions of dollars and dozens of patents, might have to pay 150 or even 300. I was able to get away with 75. This is also something you would want a lawyer to look at, particularly the claims part of the patent. You don't want to be writing that on your own. But it's a little bit more lax because you have an opportunity to then file an actual patent that would correct all of the mistakes. That costs a lot more money. but once you have the real patent, you're protected from the provisional filing date. So at least do the provisional to get it out there. Costs, the developer license, 125, $38 for cloud build, 186 for the oh, that's a good point. Thanks, Susan. Presenting in a pitch competition can adversely affect your ability, apparently. So get your provisional patent even earlier. So thanks for adding that. Administrative stuff, you know, I went cheap and easy, $18. Whoops, the legal total, you know, the privacy policy, I went with a freebie, and then I paid $250 for the provisional patent. This also was kind of a sweetheart deal. Don't expect that that might be that cheap. So I was able to get it up there for just over $600 in terms of the total cost. Now, if you're not a developer yourself, the biggest cost is going to be paying the developer, of course. But the rest of it, you know, doesn't necessarily have to be that expensive in terms of the actual cost of, you know, what it takes in terms of infrastructure, etc., to actually do the thing. Now, to pay someone like me or Jamal, that is probably going to be your biggest expense. So that wraps it up. Sorry, I had to breeze through the end. We got caught talking in depth and taking questions about other things earlier. Yeah, so yeah, the biggest cost savings. How much do I think it would have cost to hire a developer to do this? Oh, geez, I don't. That's one I'll have to take that one and put that on my parking lot. Cost to hire.
Neil, thank you for doing this. If anybody has any questions, please raise your hands. We'll open it up to Q&A. This is really incredibly valuable information. I absolutely love this. I you know, in terms of costs to hire developers, I think that's a fantastic question. I mean, of course, it depends, because you have to find the person, and you have to, it depends on the number of hours and the scope of work. But, you know, like, go freelancer.com, Upwork, you can find freelancers to do that type of work. So,
and you know, choosing, like, you know, React Native or Flutter, that's a cost savings choice too, because the most popular platforms have the most developers out there that you can get for the lowest rates on platforms like Todd was talking about. DJ?
Yep, DJ, you got, and then Donna.
Oh, does Donna want to go first? I can wait.
Go for it, DJ.
Okay. So I was curious about when you showed those deployment costs, right? What's that licensing agreement that you get for how many years, where you then have to replenish the license on the app itself?
Well, I believe the $100 you have to pay annually. The $25, I think Google gives you one for life for $25. They're big and cheap, but crappy customer service. So I'll definitely diss Google on that one. Their Play Store is a bit of a nightmare to deal with. So slow and all that jazz. But I believe the $100, and I believe the other gentleman earlier mentioned that he had to re-up. So I've only paid it once. I suppose I'll have to pay again next year. But I think the Google one is $25, and you're good for life.
Thanks.
And again, at least with the two gaming platforms, you don't have to pay them until you start making serious coin.
Right.
Enough money that you don't care about at that point that you have to pay them 3%.
Donna.
Hey all, one thing in terms of the legal advice, you get what you pay for, but I remember we had someone else here that was saying they had to use Legal Zoom or whatever. So you have to do what you do, but otherwise I highly recommend against doing it the way that Neil's done it. But you know, if that's
I also recommended against it. I was like, this is what I did.
But,
don't do this. Consultant attorney.
Well, yeah, that's something I got an intellectual property lawyer at my firm. I could probably help you out if you contact me, because I just wanted to say this game is awesome. I told you I don't know if I have to reload it, And so maybe pitching it out to all these engineers and whatever, and I'm a lawyer, but yes, Susan, it's an awesome, awesome game. I find it way more addictive and relaxing than Wordle. And so all that stuff I need to know in a vague way. I know, and I'd have to pay all the tons for developer. But what about the marketing and this thing? Like, that's the hard part, right? Like the communicating it out, because there's no way that this, doesn't have, and I don't know what else is out there, but if I compare it to Wordle, I think it's awesome.
Yeah, and so first of all, I want to say thank you also to Donna. She has been the person who has engaged with the app the most, who has given me the most feedback, who has been the most enthusiastic. She has left me the only review that's on the Apple Store. It's a 5-star, really nice review. So, and I've taken all of her feedback to heart, and I am working on a second version. And so one thing that I think is going to make it a little bit different and possibly be the key to making it maybe go viral is I'm building a new feature into it where you can say, give me hints, and then it highlights all the words you can score on in blue, either the full word or the part of the word. So maybe it highlights the first 3 letters and then there's still a brown one. So, I need to poke that and then swipe it off. There's some other things that make it annoying, like, once you break it down to 2 letters, like the app as it is makes you poke it to put them back into the mix. That shouldn't be there. It should just dissolve after a certain amount of time. The scoring needs to be more obvious. So having a ding that shows you, I just got 3 points. I just got, like, not just up on the top, but like right there where you go ding, and then, okay, there's a 3 that flashes. I know I just got 3 points. But the highlighter feature, I think, is what will be the thing that might make it go viral. My daughter likes playing it way more with the hints, because then it's even more relaxing. You have to do less thinking. It's just like,
Would I have to, like I say, I'm still getting a few bad words, so I got to watch who I recommend, or I have to give that caveat. And so what am I doing? Would I have to re-download it, or if you fix that up, should it correctly on my app?
Yeah, so that's another thing that I'm still working on, and I'm taking very seriously, because this is something that my daughter plays all the time, and she's 7. So, like, if I was writing a children's book, I would just not use any bad words, but this is algorithmic and based on statistics. And so in order to make it safe, initially I just did searches of word lists for, like dictionary entries for things that have derogatory, slur, whatever the words they use in dictionaries to indicate bad words. But then I would still see things popping up where I was like, no, that shouldn't be in there either. And so, I want it to be safe for kids to play. My daughter does enjoy playing it, but I don't want her being exposed to words that, she shouldn't be. And so the weird thing is, in order to make it safe for children, I have to have baked into, and so I decided not only do I not want those words to score, I don't want those words to ever even be created and show up on the screen at all. But in order to do that, I have to have a deny list, and the deny list is just horrific. It's horrific. And I'm talking about words that and I used the most the biggest Scrabble word list to start with, in order to be able to have something to start with, and then whittling it down, and things that are valid in Scrabble that should not be, like it's awful.
Can you do like a 14+ label or something like that? But I'm just saying, you got a big winner there. So I think your terms of use and your privacy policy, and maybe your disclaimer or something.
Yeah. And so what it's involved doing is I'm reading every single word in that 20,000 word list, because I only go 5 letters and below. So I'm reading it all. Have you anybody
well, look up one that starts with CU and get that off there.
Yeah.
Only one, but still.
Oh my.
Yeah. Whenever I was teaching Tableau, one of the common formulas is count, and so I was always afraid of missing a letter when I was typing that, teaching a class.
Yeah, but no, I gotta tell you guys, it's really, really fun if you haven't tried it yet.
Thanks, but I think the hints is going to make it better, and you know, I'm really glad that you brought, you know, the words thing to my attention, and I realized that I can't just do the lazy thing. I want it to have as many scoring words as possible to make it as fun as possible, but you know, also make sure it's safe for my daughter to play. So really appreciate that, and there is more coming. You know, the other biggest feedback I got was having some kind of instructions in the app and or tutorial, which is also on the way.
Yeah, you need that, but you know, like if you get the right, I don't know, gamer or celeb or whoever to pitch that thing, like it's gonna really take off.
So I wasn't like this. I considered like an alpha release. Like it wouldn't if this was a company, it would never have been public. But I don't have money or a company, so I put it public and then people can download it. I don't have to like add everyone's iPhone ID so that they can be a tester. They just put it on the App Store. But in terms of marketing, one thing I'm going to do once I think I have something that is sweet and I want to be a first, you know, commercial release, there's a CS50 gaming course that uses Unity. So I'm going to do that course and then use that and the Discord channel that's devoted to that to publicize it. That's how I'm going to do it. It'll cost me $50 or whatever it is for the CS50 course. The exercises I can do in my sleep, and since I've already built a game, and then I'm going to try and promote it in that way. But I do. There was a question that came in on the chat from Jen about ROI and all that. I pulled the ads in the Apple one before launch, and then the Google one I pulled the odds after launch because I found out that the ads were covering part of the screen on some devices, and so I did make, I think, $3 or $4 before I pulled the plug. So, but what Swapnil said is absolutely the return on investment. What my primary goal with creating this was to convince somebody that even though I don't know all of the, you know, different Python libraries to do AI stuff, I'm capable and can do it. And I didn't have time like Amanda Fetch to do 30 other degrees and courses at the same time I'm doing HBAP. I don't know how she does it. So I was like, HBAP is enough. Like I can't be going and doing all these Python machine learning things at the same time. But I wanted to do this, you know, as another way of saying like, hey, you know, I can do this stuff. And so that's what, you know, got me from doing, you know, from being, you know, from going from, if I'm still sharing my screen, from the, you know, data analyst, you know, that's what made me bridge this gap from being a data analyst to convincing someone, hey, you can train me up so I can do this. And by the way, my next career goal after that is management, because I wanted to, but there's a couple more things I wanted to do. I wanted to get some cloud infrastructure experience, and I wanted to get some AI ML experience. And then along with all the data analysis, data pipeline stuff, data visualization I did before, that's when I'm ready to say, okay, I can run a group that's doing this kind of stuff.
Neil,
so
I'm looking at the time. I just want to thank you for this. This was absolutely incredible. I'm going to pause the recording, but before I do that, I just want to remind everyone that next week, we've got Ashley Wilson, who's going to continue this thread of conversation about building an app and the business model and how she went about doing that. Ben Dooley's coming up, feedback session with Roland, Miko Yuk, and in mid-December, Mary Spender. Thank you all for joining. Susan, did you want to close out anything? And I'll launch the poll.
Good. I was just going to say about the poll. And yeah, Neil, thank you so much. This is really inspirational. You know, it's just great. And I do love the game. I echo Donna. So, and I'm really looking forward to the hints.
The hints makes it so much more relaxing and easy. Definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming. I'm going to pause the recording now. Thanks, everyone. Please stick around.